To build with Rootical, there's basically two things you need to do. First, you need to get things done. Action speaks louder than words. And two, we're looking for people that are really transparent in their intentions in building with Rootical, transparent about their ability to commit to building with us, transparent about their constraints also. And so, really in this for the long run. I believe that African founders and entrepreneurs are incredibly talented and incredibly grounded in the problems they are obsessed about solving. Yet investors still invest in foreigners mostly. If you look around, most of agribusinesses in Kenya or Uganda are actually foreign-owned and led. And if you look at the companies that are successful in raising money, in a recent year, 8 out of 10 were foreign-owned and led. So I think that's a problem. Steward ownership is a way to hack capitalism. What we see often, I find, is that outside capital generally looks for short-term financial returns, right? And often that comes at the cost of long-term community benefits and value. And a purpose-driven enterprise should create both profits and value impact for the communities it's trying to serve. That kind of mission drift, right? Where we start out with very beautiful values, amazing principles, a fantastic mission, but the more we onboard external money, the more kind of our values dilute, right? And I think that's really the fundamental problem. We've seen some examples of that in Kenya as well, with big companies raising tons of money and then in terms of their potential impact, completely going down the drain.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Organic Guy podcast. This is your home of organic conversations. I'm your host, the Organic Guy, and right around here we have conversations on how we can make our food systems really get to work for us rather than against us. Today, I want us to have a conversation around how can we build businesses around the regenerative and agroecology movement. And I think today I've got a perfect guest to help us have that conversation and get to understand what it takes, the nitty-gritties of actually building a business around this space. It's really a pleasure to get to know him as a person and some of the things that he has done around this space. He's the co-founder of Rootical, which is a regenerative startup studio that is based in Uganda. And I'm happy to say we have partnered with him and he'll be sponsoring a series we'll be doing called the African Regenerative Frontrunners, where we are bringing into the front view, if you may, some of the people doing amazing work around the regenerative movement in the African continent. And we'll be doing this in collaboration with Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast, which is usually hosted by Kon. That will be interesting and very much looking forward to that. He goes by the name of Hannes van Eeckhout. I hope I got the last part correct, but welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot. Glad to be here.
I mean, for me, it's always a little bit different, especially the last part of your name, because for us, especially here in Africa, like one of the exposures, at least culturally, we got exposed to is when we were watching football. And we grew up watching people like Robin van Persie or like Edwin van der Sar. So like the last part of your name, I always associate it with Dutch people, or like in the Netherlands. So I always have to remind myself you're from Belgium. So in a way, like, there's a cross-border...
We speak the same language, basically.
Yeah, interesting. So that's always an interesting part. But I have so much questions in regards of how we can actually build businesses around regenerative agriculture. It's something we've been doing now for a while. But before we get to that, just give us a little bit of context on your upbringing. Yeah, where did you grow up? Did you have like an exposure to farming or sustainable farming? And do you see yourself sort of getting involved in this space?
I come from a very normal middle-class family in Belgium. My mom was a midwife. My father was actually working and leading in an agroecological NGO. He was mostly active in Latin America, and I also somehow ended up in Peru years later. We did have one farmer in the family, a great uncle, brother of my grandmother, and we used to go on the farm as kids, and we even used to go to harvest sugar beets for the cows with the entire family once a year, and that was also always a big event. I was mostly looking forward to driving or sitting on the tractor, but I guess that's where things sprouted for me. And through my parents, I really kind of got the value of solidarity and international solidarity deeply entrenched into my being through their education, basically. And so when I left university, I knew I wanted to do something with either farmers or water. Yeah, years later, that's really what I'm focused on. So I'm quite excited about that. Shortly after using university, I got a chance to travel and go and live in Peru, where I worked for about 5 years with the organic smallholder farmers movement, ANPE Peru, and the National University of Agriculture, La Molina, on all kinds of things surrounding the organic movement. So from farmer training, capacity building, organizational strengthening, market access, participatory guarantee systems, policy and advocacy, all those things. I kind of got in touch with them over there. And also I'm a master in business engineering, so kind of a economic management business profile by education. I always had that tendency to look closer at especially market access and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it makes sense that you always sort of drifted and found yourself around the regenerative space, especially in the area of building businesses. I always try and ask why Uganda, because when most people want to set up businesses, especially in East Africa, the first place they go to is Kenya. Kenya is sort of marketed as this sort of African savanna, if you may, of businesses. So why did you end up setting a startup studio in Uganda?
So after Peru, I got really deeply convinced and passionate about this more holistic view at life, right? In the Andean mountain range, there's a big thing called cosmovision, like the holistic vision of or worldview, closely related to nature and the spirits in the mountains and the ancestors and so on. And so I really deeply got connected to the values and principles of agroecology, and also its power to transform rural livelihoods and economies. Then I moved back to Europe, Belgium, where I'm from, and I got the chance to work with a direct food sales network called the Food Assembly in English, probably one of Europe's largest food sales networks or direct food sales initiatives by then. And there I really loved the power of purpose-driven entrepreneurship and kind of how it aligns impacts and profits, right? You make more money, you have more impact than the other way around. Really, if your social enterprise, your business model is designed very well, those kind of match one-on-one. And so I did that for 5 years, really enjoyed the business development side of it. I was creating the Dutch brand, launching it in Flanders and the Netherlands. Then I became in charge of both countries, Belgium and the Netherlands. And we really got up to a sizable network, about 120 local food communities, selling 12-14 million euros in annual sales and produce directly from producer or farmer, a beer maker, cheese maker, chocolate maker, whatever, directly to consumers through an e-commerce platform, basically. And so I left after 5 years. I've learned a number of things there, but I really love the power of entrepreneurship. And that's how I ended up in Uganda, kind of by chance. I went along with my now wife, and she works in education, also a lot on innovation, but mostly in education. And I went along and started doing some consultancies, but soon I felt it a bit itchy and wanted to build something more substantial again. And that's how eventually I ended up co-founding Rootical with my Ugandan partners. But Uganda is a very rich, naturally endowed country. Some people say you throw a seed anywhere and it will grow. I think that's a bit of a misconception. Farming and agroecology does imply a lot of management and knowledge. So that's maybe a bit of an optimistic statement, but Uganda really has the potential to be the food basket of East Africa. Currently about 50 million people. They could feed up to 200 million people according to studies from the FAO. So there is quite some potential there for sure. Uganda is also a leading organic nation, right? After India, actually it's the country with the highest number of organic certified producers. Now a lot of these producers are probably certified in groups, and mostly producing commodities, export crops, right? The so-called cash crops, actually a colonial term, as I learned through your podcast. But yeah, it's a fascinating place to be. There's a lot of positive policy developments. There's quite a strong NGO, civil society movement around agroecology, just like I would say Tanzania and also Kenya to a certain extent, even though some things are going in another direction lately.
Quite interesting, and it's true in terms of even you talk like to a local Kenyan, they know that a lot of their eggs comes from Uganda, or like onions comes from Uganda. So there is this sort of I guess superior complex that Ugandans have over Kenyans in terms of we feed you sometimes. So as you said, it has a lot of potential, and I think their policies are more aligned into like supporting small scale farmers and sustainable farming systems. And to a large extent, most of their farmers actually relate more into like sustainable farming systems because this is what they have been doing for a long time. I think during the conversation, we'll be mentioning a lot about regenerative agriculture and regeneration. So I think it's fair we sort of have a definition, sort of like an idea of what it actually means, right? Different people, different organizations have different definition of what regenerative agriculture is. But from your perspective, how do you define it?
It's such a tricky question, right? And maybe some people say we shouldn't define it, right? Because that would limit it. And it's actually a continuous process of improvement towards producing more in line with nature instead of against her. Others say it's a science, a practice, and a movement. I think in the African context, if we talk about African agroecology or regenerative agriculture, I don't really make a big difference between them. I use them as synonyms, even though I know there are very important nuances to the debate. But yeah, I think it's less about the debate than about the actual end goals. But in the African context, I really think it's also about liberation, a movement for liberation and decolonization, right? And I'm very aware about that as a white guy in Uganda, trying to work with Ugandan entrepreneurs, building food systems, businesses. Yeah, I think there's a heavy decolonial or decolonizing aspect to it in the African context. And liberation, liberate yourselves from the shackles of capitalism and extractive capitalism especially, and the past, right? The legacy of slavery basically, and those so-called cash crops, which were basically meant just to pay off debts to Western countries. If you look at defining it, I'm thinking about this notion of a combination between minimizing mechanical soil disturbance and minimizing agrochemical soil disturbance, right? So are you really serious about reducing, phasing out, eliminating agrochemicals, and are you very aware about the negative adverse effects of excessive soil tillage, right? And if you are working on those two things very intentionally, very truthfully, then I think you're in the agroecological regenerative agriculture corner, right? If you're not, you're basically greenwashing.
And that's the beauty of regenerative. I think, especially in its earlier stages, trying to find its feet. And it's something also I was reading out in terms of like the organic farming movement. In its early days, they had a lot of disagreements on what organic actually means, if they should have certification or not. So it's always part of the process, I guess, in terms of when you have some new ideas, you got different disagreement or definition of what it actually means. So it's always an interesting part for me. You mentioned that you've been working with Ugandan businesses and entrepreneurs. One of the things that I saw it's a bit different with your model is you have established like a studio. So I'm trying to understand like what is the difference between that, because like in the conventional model what we have is sort of like accelerators, or like you have people with funds just coming in and sort of injecting into a business. So what would you say is different with your model?
The venture studio model or startup studio model is quite new, but it's really booming in the last years, and you'll see more and more studios pop up everywhere across the continent as well. We are part of a venture studio network in Africa already, so that there is growing momentum for it. But let me try and define it and also differentiate it from the others. A studio is basically a business building machine, right? It's a business building businesses, and our job is to become excellent at the process of building, in our case, agroecological businesses and optimizing the kind of conveyor belt that spins out businesses all the time. So we are bringing together talent, resources, and ideas. In the beginning, I was thinking that both resources and ideas and talent, would be the challenge, but it's really going to be about the people we find and work with. And yeah, agroecological entrepreneurs in a country like Uganda face a lot of barriers, right? And especially in the first 2-3 years of building, their chances of succeeding are quite small. So as a studio, we want to drastically increase those success rates. And we do that by kind of building a support system around our entrepreneurs, bringing or combining all kinds of capacity building, training, mentoring, legal support, HR services, all of that. So we build a team around our startups with all kinds of functions that they usually don't benefit from in the first years, right? Your HR manager, you're going to hire them much later usually. And in our case, that gives our businesses an unfair advantage, as we could say. And that's the whole point. And so in typical venture building, you mentioned incubators, accelerators, like success rates are often below 10%, right? So for every 10 businesses people start, only one might see the growth phase happening. While in studios, in venture studios, success rates are typically between 30 and 50%, right? Because we are swarming the best people with the best people, as we like to say. And so an incubator takes an existing idea and an existing person, a founder, right? Or a founder team sometimes. And then they help them move through the first stages of actually trying to find a customer that kind of buys their product repetitively and then allow them to get ready for growth, right? And once they are in that growth stage, they can now connect to accelerators, where usually it's a short-term, kind of light touch program, not always providing access to finance, which I think should really be avoided. If you're doing business development, you need to also provide the means to apply whatever the entrepreneur has been learning and working on with you. And so these accelerators are sometimes 3 months, 6 months, very light touch, and they don't have any skin in the game. They are evaluated by the number of companies that go through their programs. Why for us, as a business, as a studio, we are only viable if our businesses that we build become viable and pay returns also to Rootical. I'm not saying we don't need incubators or accelerators. We do need them, and we do need support in throughout different stages. But what I like about the studio model is that we are very early on involved. So in our case, we engage people without ideas even. Yeah, I mean, you can come and bring your ideas, and our founders have a wealth of expertise and knowledge and fabulous ideas. But we start by focusing on the problem, because we want to address key challenges in the national food system dynamics, right? So we start from a deep food systems analysis, problem mapping, and then throughout our process, we identify the founders and the problems they want to be working on. And potentially also there's some co-founder matching happening, but we allow that to happen very naturally, very organically. So a studio has a chance to be very systematic in its building process. So we call this the studio playbook or the flywheel. And as I said, we need to get better at building agroecological businesses each time we go through that venture building cycle. And it's also an opportunity to be very systemic, right? To dig very deep into the root causes, hence the name Rootical, into the root causes of the national food system dynamics, being in Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, wherever we are, to then build businesses that can address those key challenges, right? Really specifically looking at leverage points, as it's called by Donella Meadows, systems theory thinker. Leverage points are basically points in the system where with relatively small resources we can have maximum impact.
Definitely makes sense, and especially for a sector where big players are not really interested in that area. I mean, it's a pertinent problems that we have in the food systems, but it's very hard for a venture capital getting into that space because they don't clearly quite see a return in the investment.
I think as a studio, we're a systemic venture building studio, right? So we are interested in building profitable, scaling businesses because profits are a precondition to delivering impact at scale, right? So profit and impact really go hand in hand, and we design for impact as much as we design for profits from the very start. And so this systemic venture building approach also allows us to place a few big bets, right, as you were mentioning. And we can typically look at problem areas where most investors and founders are usually hesitant to go into. And one of them is landscape level regeneration, right? I'm truly fascinated by the kind of the opportunity we have in restoring soils, connecting that to reforestation, and connecting then that to water cycle regeneration, right? We can really bring back rains in the driest parts of Kenya, in the driest parts of Uganda. We can bring back rains if we have a landscape approach to it. And our bet is then to develop a business model that can bring about those landscape level regeneration effects. Improved water holding capacity of the landscape, rehydrating the landscape, right? Increasing biodiversity, and connecting clusters of farmers that are regenerating the land. And then if we can kind of connect the clusters, we then might have a watershed level intervention. And if we have a business model that can drive from serving one farmer all the way to regenerating and rehydrating one landscape, that's the kind of big bold bets I think we should be looking at. And I think it's truly fascinating. There's a number of entrepreneurs on your podcast, on Koen's podcast, that are already doing that, but we need many more, right? And as a studio, I think we're well placed to place those bets.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I think it's very much needed in terms of giving such entrepreneurs an opportunity, especially early on. And I think you mentioned something very important in terms of like connecting them with the right people, because I think like early on, especially when you're starting a business, you don't have the resources or like the connection to get the right people into the right places that you may need a little bit of our support. So I think having that access to a space where you can be connected to people who will very much add value to what you're trying to build is very important. So I'm fascinated by like the whole process on how you go around, let's say, onboarding a business, and like how does the whole process look like? So there's an entrepreneur in Uganda or Kenya or Tanzania who's sort of fascinated with what you're trying to build, and let's say they have an idea and they want to be part of Rootical. So how does that whole onboarding process look like?
So we don't onboard businesses, right? We only recruit and select talented founders for their potential as entrepreneurs and their kind of interest in building with Rootical. We have a cohort-based approach where we run a 2-year cohort cycle, but we're also more and more looking at building ventures in-house, where we develop the ideas to a certain stage in-house and then find the right operating co-founder team that can take the business to growth. So the first stage is usually our call for founders, call for applicants, and then quite an intensive recruitment and selection process. We have hundreds of applicants each call, and we narrow it down to 50 food system change makers. We call them food system leaders, and we invite them to join our boot camp, which is 7 to 10 day training, very immersive kind of deep dive into food systems practice, food systems mapping, identifying the key challenges as I mentioned before. And then we go into choosing problem areas founders want to focus on. We move into problem validation. Again, going out, talking to farmers, talking to potential customers, being farmers, market vendors, end consumers. Always making sure that the way we see and understand the problem is the same way as the target customer does, right? So we practice deep empathy, deep listening in that process. And then we kind of gather all our insights about the problem space, and we turn that into design opportunities and come up with a number of solutions, potential business ideas that could address or help to address a specific systems challenge. Let's say we're looking at access to organic inputs, affordable, or there's not enough inputs, they are not affordable, they are not well distributed, and so on, right? So that can be one problem space we're looking at. We're developing a business to address that issue because we basically noticed that, for instance, there's a lot of small producers of organic inputs, very effective concoctions. I'm sure you have them in Kenya too, right? But most of them fail to grow beyond their own community because of a number of reasons, right? So can we help them to serve a much larger market by developing basically sales and distribution mechanisms for organic inputs to serve farmers across the country, basically. And so basically we're developing a matchmaking, village-based agent kind of model to match supply and demand of organic inputs, making them widely available and affordable for farmers entering that transition or already moving into the transition to agroecology. Anyway, that's just an example. So we move from the challenge to a solution and an idea about the business that could kind of drive this solution forward. And then we go out again and we do what we call human-centered design. We go out and talk to farmers, to target customers, every stage, every iteration, kind of validating or also learning where we are wrong about our hypotheses, our assumptions underlying the business model we're trying to build. And so that takes about 6 months. It's an iterative, human-centered design process where we move from an idea to early validation, early traction, working on a kind of MVP, minimum viable product of our product or service, and then we kind of learn as much as we can. We say fail fast, fail a lot, fail forward. So ideally we get it wrong a lot of times in those first months, and each time we get it wrong, it's an opportunity to get closer to what might work, right? So that takes about 6 months, and after that 6 months, we then move into piloting stage. In piloting, we now put out the business in real life. We try to serve real customers, make real sales, and it's all about learning. Again, it's not about making big sales already. It's about small transactions frequently and learning about our customer, about our market, about the logistics of producing, selling, and distributing our solution. And at some point, when we feel confident enough, especially about the founder leading the business or the founder team, then we decide to invest and legally establish the company. By this point, we already invested $3,000-$4,000 in the whole process of validating the business model, basically, building traction. But then we legally establish the company and we make available about $15,000, if not more, to work towards product market fit, right? To really establish the company in the market and get ready for growth stage, basically.
Okay, that's quite an interesting process. So I'm quite wondering, like, what have you seen so far from the cohorts you have had so far? So let's say in terms of like females who are applying, or like the kind of businesses that you see a lot more people are interested in. Are they interested in like the production side, or like in the consumer-centric side, or like in the processing side? So what are some of the interesting statistics you're seeing?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. Naturally, the pool of people that apply, they tend to converge towards inputs, processing, and market access, I would say, right? Because those are problem solution areas that attract a lot of interest by many of the founders that we end up working with. And again, that makes, or that creates a few unattended opportunities, right? Or more like more virgin opportunities where there's less less done. One thing I noticed is that livestock is quite absent in agroecology, right? Even though the role of animals is absolutely fundamental in terms of regenerating soils with their manure and their role in ecosystems, there are not so many livestock businesses in agroecological business, and even in the movement, there are relatively little livestock solutions, and we're building a few of them, so I'm excited about that. The other one is for instance, the whole syntropic agroforestry. The opportunity of agroforestry in general seems to be underdeveloped in my opinion, and then the landscape level regeneration opportunities through business. I think that's also kind of one of those areas where we have to place big bets.
Quite interesting. Something very interesting that I saw about your model is one of your core principles is about steward ownership, and I think it's a very new concept, especially in the area of venture building and starting businesses. So just give us an idea what that entails and how is it different from like the traditional sort of model of owning businesses, of shareholding.
It's a big topic, right? We could spend an entire hour discussing it. But steward ownership is a way to hack capitalism, or to redesign capitalism and address some of the flaws of it. What we see often, I find, is that outside capital generally looks for short-term financial returns, right? And often, that I'm not saying always, but often that comes at the cost of long-term community benefits and value. And a purpose-driven enterprise should create both profits and value impact for the communities it's trying to serve. And so that kind of mission drift, right, where we start out with very beautiful values, amazing principles, a fantastic mission, but the more we onboard external money, the more kind of not only our ownership, but also our values dilute, right? And I think that's really the fundamental problem. We've seen some examples of that in Kenya as well, with big companies raising tons of money and then kind of, in terms of their potential impact, completely going down the drain, right? And so steward ownership, in my opinion, it's a way to avoid mission drift and to make sure that long-term value creation, value in the wider sense now, including profits, but also ecological sustainability, regeneration, community benefits, farmer livelihood improvements, income improvements for farmers especially, and so on, to make sure that that value creation always stays front and center of what we're doing, right? And so how does it work? Basically, it introduces a strict separation between financial rights and voting rights. So we strictly separate decision-making power and profit sharing or dividend rights in a company. And that kind of avoids that tendency towards short-term financial returns. Second, we also introduce a golden share. And a golden share is a third-party, independent, purpose-driven entity, let's say, that has the only mission is to veto any changes within the legal constitution of the company that would go against its mission, against its purpose, or against its steward ownership setup, right? So companies can still be sold, they can still merge, they can still pay out sizable, significant financial returns to their investors and founders. Of course, we don't question that. Everyone should get their fair share. But we do ask beforehand, what is a fair share? What is a fair return for you? What kind of risk-adjusted return would you need, right? And how are we going to bring about that return as well, right? We don't kind of want to bet that only 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100 businesses becomes your unicorn and is going to compensate for all the losses on the other side. No, we want to talk about viable growth pathways and viable exit strategies for founders and financial shareholders. We work with the principle of redeemable equity, which basically means that financial shares eventually end up being bought back by the company if a certain return value or capped return is achieved. So for Rootical, for instance, we have financial shares in all of the companies we'll be building. We have a certain capped return expectation, but once that return is paid out, we no longer own any financial rights in that company. So now the future profits of that company can go and circle back into their mission and wider community. And it's fascinating what that can do. Let me give you one example. Eeckhout, right? Eeckhout is Europe's largest search engine right now. And instead of paying out all the profits that would usually disappear in private shareholders' pockets, like it's the case for other search engines. Eeckhout invests all their margins, all their profits into tree planting projects. Basically, financing large-scale forest regeneration, restoration, reforestation across the world, right? And it's millions and millions a year, and that's because Eeckhout is steward-owned.
It's quite an interesting concept, because now with that model, it sort of puts like the responsibility, the social responsibility in their DNA.
And it locks it in the legal structures as well. So once you go steward ownership, the golden shareholder is there to make sure that you can never go back. Right, and that's because you start out with your great ideals and mission, but maybe when money comes in, people get distracted and excited, and so. But in this case, there is no way of going back. And if we're using often public resources to build agroecological businesses, I think we also we have a responsibility to make sure that those resources are not kind of diverted away into the pockets of what we call absent financial owners, right? Because what happens? You build an agroecological business, you raise money. That money often will come from Europe or the US or abroad, for sure, right? There is more and more money available within Uganda, within East Africa. Let's definitely look at also mobilizing that money. But generally, the founder or the founder team end up losing majority control of their company sooner or later, right? And who then is the decision maker in the end? Who calls the shots? Some absent financial owner at the other side of the world. They don't have a clue about why you're doing this. They don't have a clue about how difficult it is to build a business in Uganda. I'm barely scratching the first surface on what that means. And in that sense, I'm also not best placed basically to lead a studio in Uganda, right? That's why we recently engaged a new director for Rootical Uganda. I'm really excited about that. Abu is a stellar social entrepreneur. He's built 2 businesses, brought them to scales in the past 10 years. So he knows the hustle and grind of what it takes to build a business in Uganda much better than I would ever be able to. Anyway, the issue is absent financial owners, right? And so they end up calling the shots based on some general VC success formula or whatever, but not really grounded in that deep understanding of context and place.
Interesting model. So I'm thinking from like a legal perspective. Is it anchored? So let's say from Uganda perspective, like law, do they allow such an ownership in their laws, or how do you go around that?
Yeah, so we have published a study. We have published a study about the application of steward ownership in the Ugandan legal frameworks, and it's actually quite straightforward. We can have a single entity where we split, as I said, financial shares and decision shares. We also introduced the golden share in the Articles of Association, and then we it's actually quite straightforward, I would say.
So it is possible.
It is definitely possible. It will depend on every country's legal frameworks, but in general there's a way to make it work. With one entity or a dual entity model is also often used, where a foundation or a non-profit entity owns the for-profit entity, and so the profits can be distributed in the for-profit entity to investors, to founders, to the foundation, or to other players like Eeckhout, giving out money to tree planting, reforestation kind of projects. Patagonia doing the same, with making Mother Nature the chair of the board. So there's quite some fascinating opportunities there. You mentioned it in the introduction, right? We are building food systems and businesses that can help us build food systems that work with us or for us instead of against us, right? And we also have to acknowledge that, the powers that be, the dominant system, big ag, big food, is quite powerful, right? And so what they typically do is as soon as a business starts to grow and be successful, they kind of acquire the business and liquidate it, right? They shut it down. And so in the end, when we talk about entrepreneurship, we need to talk about ownership, basically, to prevent that kind of mission drift and to prevent that kind of acquire and close kind of, or capture and close kind of strategy of big ag and big food. If we want to kind of bring about a new food system, right? And it's already emerging. There's hundreds of businesses, thousands of businesses being built across the world on these principles of regenerative agriculture, agroecology, and I would also say purpose-driven entrepreneurship, even steward ownership is really making big strides forward. It's booming across the world, I would say. It's really fascinating how much people are already working on these principles. But at some point, when we are kind of threatening or starting to threaten more and more the dominant system, there will be even more resistance and even more aggressive pushback, right? And then we need our founders and our businesses to be grounded in a very solid way in their values and mission, right? And steward ownership kind of helps to lock that into the legal DNA and structure, as you said.
Very much needed because, the big ag also have their own interest in which they must protect, right, to sort of give their shareholders the maximum returns as possible.
If we talk about impact investment, how can we talk about impact investment without looking at the ownership structure of a company? I think there's a lot of work to do there.
Yes, I think so as well. It's quite interesting because I'm fascinated by the kind of people or entrepreneurs that you've been able to attract to Rootical. So I'm trying to imagine in terms of like characteristics or like their DNA. What have you observed so far from those kind of entrepreneurs who are sort of inclined into starting regenerative and sustainable farming business? What do they have in common?
We've actually written an article on that, and we plan to publish more on this because this is really at the core of our work, right? As a venture studio, we're not in the business of agroecology, we're actually in the business of talent. And so attracting, selecting and nurturing talent is really at the core of what we do. And of course, we look at the typical traits like business acumen, grit, the growth mindset. Those are the typical kind of aspects investors or venture builders look for. Entrepreneurs should also be looking for in their co-founder team. But what we've learned over time is that to build with Rootical, there's basically two things you need to do. First, you need to get things done. Action speaks louder than words. Two, we're looking for people that are really transparent in their intentions in building with Rootical, transparent about their ability to commit to building with us, transparent about their constraints also. And so, really in this for the long run, I would say. Building a business is not something you do in a couple of months, right? It's going to be your more than full-time dedication for the next 10, 15 years at least. Apart from that, we also look at deep empathy, like how good are you at really listening to your target customer, allowing them and yourself to question the assumptions underlying your business model and always integrating feedback. Yeah, we noticed that maybe the potentially the most successful founders in our work are those humble entrepreneurs, very grounded, very much connected to and part of the communities and the problem they are trying to solve, right? And then because of that connection and groundedness, absolutely obsessed about solving that problem. If I look back, we're now into our second cohort, right? So we've engaged with about 90 potential founders so far in the last 3 years. And if I look back, the people that I was excited about having versus the people that are doing really well right now are not the same, right? So there's so much to learn, really. I think we're only scratching the surface on what it means to, as I said, attract, select, and nurture talented agroecological entrepreneurs. There's much more to be said, done, and learned in that field.
That's quite interesting because every person is different. Like every business is going to be different, going to require a different kind of person or personality. So it's quite interesting to try and sort of narrow down to how they would look like. And I guess that also adds to the long sort of question of, are entrepreneurs born or are they made? That kind of conversation. So it's quite interesting for me to try and see at least what are some of those characteristics that they embody in themselves. So it's really interesting to see that those characteristics sort of repeat itself over and over again. You've mentioned you've done 2 cohorts already so far. Is there like a story or like a business that has caught your eye or is really doing really, really well under your stewardship so far?
I'm really excited about 2 of our businesses. The first one is Eden Seeds. Emmanuel Luemba from central Uganda he's a father, he's a farmer, he's a trainer of farmers, and he really loves farming with nature. And because of him being so connected to the community and the issues they're facing as an extension worker, he got completely obsessed with the issue of, or the topic of indigenous seeds. And so he's our stellar entrepreneur right now. In this year is his first official year in business. So in 2023, we launched our cohort. In 2024, last year, he was basically piloting, building, validating his business model. And then we established the company in December last year. And so this is his first year in business. And he's served about 1,000 farmers already and sold worth $25,000 of indigenous, reliable, affordable, performant Ugandan seeds, right? Mostly maize and bean varieties. But also some vegetables. And Emma is exactly that kind of humble, grounded entrepreneur I was talking about. And he's also one of the people that surprised me most. Like seeing him back in August 2023 when we had our boot camp, I wouldn't have picked him as the person being where he is right now. No? So that, as I said, there is so much more to learn and to understand on the talent level. But Emma is a very exciting founder, and Eden Seeds is doing amazing, right? $25,000 of indigenous seeds sold in your first year. That is just absolutely spectacular. Also because it's like 3 times the level at which I see, the level of annual sales at which I see many agribusinesses stagnate, right? And now we know, he's just getting started. We really have a lot of opportunities. And what I like also is that, Eden Seeds is basically developing the market for indigenous seeds, local seed varieties, because, imported hybrid seeds, they cause dependency. Farmers can't save them, they can't be replanted. Farmers need to buy new seeds every season, along with the expensive inputs they require. So it's really tricky, right? And that it causes to higher costs, reduced farmer income, also the increased disappearing of our local varieties. And so Emma is now building a business model that can put those indigenous seeds back into the hands of farmers and also resuscitate, save all those seeds and multiply them. So how it works is basically he's training and working with groups of seed farmers, often affiliated to community seed banks, which are generally grant funded and then kind of collapse after the project ends. So he's now really developing a tangible, real market for them, selling tons and tons of local seed varieties. And he's aggregating the seeds and he's selling them to local input stores, which is the place where farmers already buy their seeds, right? And so he's now kind of positioning a trusted local variety in those local input stores next to the hybrid and imported seeds. So it's really, really fascinating. But then the seeds it's not just about the seeds. They only also become an entry point to work on farming agroecologically, right? On farming with nature instead of against her. First and foremost with your seed farmers, which are now about 40, 50, going up to 80, 100 in the coming months. And then connecting that also to the local input stores, which can then now also recommend organic solutions that go with those indigenous seed varieties, right? So it's really a big kind of platform for change across the value chain, eventually ending up with more climate resilient, more nutritious, more affordable seed varieties, performing very well for farmers, also putting more nutritious local varieties back on consumers' plates, right? In the village, in the local markets, nationally and regionally. So I'm really excited about Eden Seeds, as you can see. Maybe another one I can highlight is we call it regraze for now. The goal is to promote regenerative grazing or rotational grazing, or in other words, holistic grazing management, which basically mimics the natural herd behavior where a compact group of animals move on a certain piece of land, grazing for a short while, dumping their droppings, punching them into the soil with their feet, and so on, and then they move on to the next part, right? So after they leave, the grass has not been overgrazed, and it is now left to rest for a long time before the next herd arrives and starts grazing again, right? So it's a very powerful way to regenerate grazing lands and even entire ecosystems, I would say. So we wanted to promote that, but how do you promote that as a business, right? That's then the question we start asking. and we came up with a regenerative or mobile fencing kit. Basically, a kit that allows farmers to move their fences several times a day, move their herds of cattle. We're looking at dairy farmers in the first place. To graze their land more holistically, right? And to kind of activate the benefits of rotational grazing. Again, it's in this case, we're developing a product. It's a kit. It's fence, wire, poles, solar panel, battery, and connecting that to the wires. It's a mental barrier, right? Any cow can run through this kind of fence, but they get trained and they learn how to respect it, and that's how they move regeneratively across the wider grazing lands. And again, now the product, we're selling a kit, and our business is selling that kit to farmers, to livestock keepers. But selling the kit actually becomes an entry point to engage with farmers, livestock keepers, in this case, to engage in a deeper conversation about regeneration, right? And what it means to manage their grazing lands regeneratively.
Fascinating businesses. Yeah. And I'm really interested because part of the series that we are doing, we're calling the African Regenerative Frontiers. I think I had a conversation with Emmanuel as well. And it was really fascinating for him to sort of get to explain how Eden Seed works and how they're working with farmers in terms of reproducing the seeds and how they're entering the market and sort of having a wider impact. So yeah, I'm really, really interested to, share that conversation with others as well. And it's really fascinating, like, to see how something so small as a seed can have such a sort of like a huge effect in the food systems, right? So as you said, it's not just like a seed. Then if a farmer buys that seed, then they might look for organic inputs or like incorporating sort of organic farming practices. I think it's also very much scalable, especially in Kenya as well. We don't have such a product in the market. Yes, we have some seed banks, but we don't have like a product that goes into the market that farmers can buy such a kind of seeds and use in their day-to-day farming practices. So it's a fascinating business. Looking forward to see how that one goes. So I'm interested to see in terms of the impact these businesses will have in the long term. So for you, do you have like a specific target in terms of these businesses? So let's say 10, 20 years from now, what kind of businesses do you see sort of producing as Rootical? Is there any target you have in terms of like businesses you want to put into the market?
We call our founders 1 billion founders, talking of 1 billion Ugandan shillings, which is about $270,000 in annual revenues, as kind of a milestone to work towards, and also to activate that vision of building really commercially viable, scalable, and impactful businesses, right? CSI is an abbreviation we use a lot. And so we want to build for scale. And profits, again, are a precondition for any business to mature, to grow, and to deliver impact at scale. So profitability and impact in our thinking always go hand in hand, and there's not necessarily a trade-off. There can be, we can have a long debate about that, but generally speaking, that would be our main goal, right? So we are looking at the local food system first, and that means, in Emma's case, it means starting Eden Seeds in your community, your village where you're from, serving your entire district by now, moving into other districts already, then replicating in other parts of the country, probably kind of spreading out, mushrooming all across the country. And then once the Ugandan market is significantly served and profitably served as well, then I think we can definitely look into replicating in other East African countries. But we really focus on local, national, and territorial markets first. As Rootical, we want to build businesses that address key challenges in the food system. And so we want our businesses, our solutions to either support or serve farmers' needs and help them move into the transition to agroecology or advance that transition while making healthy, nutritious foods available and affordable for mainstream consumers, right? So a few things we always challenge our founders on is, are you really serving the majority of Ugandans with this solution? If you're building for farmers, are you going to build something that can be relevant, affordable, and so on for the majority of smallholder farmers in Uganda? Or are you going to serve just a few large-scale landowners, for instance? Same on the consumer side, right? Are you contributing to making healthy, nutritious food available and affordable for the majority of Ugandan consumers, right? Rather than exclusively focusing on export or serving some elite niche market in the capital city, which is often the case, right? So we're not saying we don't want to do that, but we definitely want to make sure that our businesses are designed to address the majority. Another abbreviation we use is RMD. Is it truly and deeply regenerative, and is it as regenerative as it can be in terms of the business design? What's also the transition pathway, or how do you deepen your regeneration in your business? Let's say M from majority and mainstream, right? Do you serve the majority of consumers or farmers rather than a small elite or niche market? And then D from distributed and decentralized. Is your business model geared to building more decentralized food systems, distributing power, and leveraging all the kind of benefits that can give, right? For instance, organic fertilizer. No, they are often quite bulky and heavy to transport. Actually, the cost of transport could be higher than the cost of production of your organic fertilizer, if it's solid, right? So can we come up with decentralized production and distribution models for those organic fertilizers, kind of reducing the logistics, the cost of logistics and transport costs, while also distributing how wealth is generated and allocated within society, right? So Eden Seeds does this as well. No, very locally connecting local seed producers with local input stores where farmers can now buy those seeds. And if they're so local, that means they are absolutely adapted to that context, right? And to that climate.
It's quite an interesting overview, and something that my friend Koen always asks his guests in his Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and food podcast. If you one day woke up with $1 billion US, right? What would you do with that money? What would you invest in?
I love that question, and every time I hear it, I think of a different answer. But I want to start from the premise that I don't know what's best for Uganda's or Kenya's food system, right? The people that know best are the people that are rooted in their communities, facing the daily struggles and the problems they live with, and the people that are obsessed, like Emma, with solving them, right? And so I think we need much more initiatives like Rootical that help uplift and build with those kind of grounded entrepreneurs, right? In impact investment, there's a lot of talk about context and place-based investment. That's, I think, why landscape regeneration also has so much potential, because it is very context-specific and place-based. So we need to build a support system, an ecosystem for agroecological entrepreneurs and enterprises around the world, right? So I would like to see hundreds of Rooticals mushrooming around the world. I would develop much more incubators and accelerators, like the Nature Accelerator is doing amazing job in East Africa, Kenya and Uganda for now, with plans to go to other parts as well. Have you had them on the podcast?
Not yet. Yeah, I think I'll have to look for them.
So it's an accelerator for agroecological businesses, right? And so if I would have $1 billion, I'm not sure it would be enough actually, but I would replicate Rootical's venture studio model across the world in different bioregional contexts. Each time, I would see myself more in a support function. Each time, finding the right kind of studio founders, incredibly talented entrepreneurs with a solid track record of building agribusinesses, ideally, that can lead the development of a studio like Rootical in their specific context, and then connect them again to local and global impact investors and funders that can support our mission. So I would spend a significant part of that money on replicating our model, running hundreds of cohorts with dozens of studios across the world. I would love to take this to Peru, where it all started for me. I would love to go to India, to West Africa, Indonesia. No, there's a lot of fascinating markets where I think our studio model could really allow grassroots, kind of bottom-up entrepreneurs to emerge and become very successful and impactful in changing the way their food system operates, right? Once they build businesses that become impactful, profitable at scale. So that would be my first kind of layer of investment. The second one would be to have more accelerators, like, again, replicating nature. Nature and Rootical are implemented in Uganda by Shona, a Ugandan business development entity, key partner in everything we do. We are co-founders in Rootical. And so with Shona, we also started a community of practice for agroecological entrepreneurship in East Africa. And in that community of practice, we're trying to learn and build about what it takes for more agroecological businesses to emerge and become successful. And so the accelerator part is really important. We also need to build the funding infrastructure. Basically, we are working, conceptualizing a funding vehicle, maybe an evergreen investment, a holding company or something like that, that can basically finance, make money available from $1,000 all the way to $1 million, right? Which is the whole growth spectrum, I would say, or the missing middle in finance. Some say it's $500 to $1 million. I would argue it's more between $5,000 and $50,000. So across that full spectrum, we need to back our entrepreneurs, our agroecological leaders with the best people, the best services and support, as well as funding, right? So Rootical accelerators, we can also develop more incubators for agroecological businesses. I would love to, if I would have time, would love to work with successful incubation models for agroecology and see how we can have those replicate across the world. I think that's kind of the ecosystem we need. Studio, incubator, accelerator, and then the funding vehicles to allow the businesses that come out of those initiatives to make it to full scale. Now, if you ask me where I would invest in terms of topics, as I said, I'm not the one to decide what's going to work for Uganda or Kenya. And I think Ugandan and Kenyan entrepreneurs are much better placed to answer that question. But I get really excited about landscape regeneration business models, about water cycle restoration, also bringing back rains by building business models, and of course the topic of nutrient density, right? We're producing more healthy foods as a result of more healthy soils.
Yeah. What is interesting for me from that whole ecosystem is sort of you're putting like money in the hands of like local entrepreneurs, right? So you're sort of decentralizing all that system and giving them the resources that they need to sort of succeed and draft solutions that are really at the core of what they do. I think that works in the long term as well, because now the entrepreneurs know the problems and they're kind of better placed to give those solutions to the people that they serve. So that's quite an interesting way you could spend that amount of money and really have such a huge impact to a lot more people.
Maybe just to bring it down a bit, like, because $1 billion seems like a lot, but I think with about 10 million, for instance, if we would get 10 million tomorrow, Nature and Rootical combined, we could easily run about 6 cohorts each in 3 countries and build 100 businesses in the next 5 years. 100 agroecological businesses in 3 countries or 2 times 3 countries across the continent or East Africa. Imagine what that would bring about, right? Because then you have 100 businesses, you have about 1,000, 2,000 agroecological food system leaders being trained and connected. And that's really what we need, right? We need a community of well-equipped, interconnected and supported frontrunners to make their vision of the agroecological business and solution that they want to bring to life for their community to make that happen, right? And that's really what I think can slowly but steadily turn around the dominant system.
Yeah, quite interesting. And I think to a certain extent, you have sort of answered some of the questions that I had, because at the podcast we say like we want to sort of have conversation around how we can make our food system really get to work for us, right? Because we know we have a lot of problems with soil degradation, the quality of food we're having, the kind of pollution that is happening to the soils and the food we're eating. So why is it fascinating for you that building businesses you think is the best solution to these problems?
I'm not sure it's the best or the only solution, right? I deeply value the work of NGOs and civil society in training farmers, connecting, organizing farmers, and doing all the important policy and advocacy work. So I'm deeply entrenched to it and part of the organic movement. But I'm excited about the potential of businesses because they become self-financing, right? When they become profitable, they can fuel their own growth based on profits while serving also a primary need. And as I said, we don't only build businesses, we also groom, train, and connect a community of frontrunners. And that community of frontrunners, if well equipped and connected, can bring about that change, right? One single business, no matter how big it will become, will, even in seeds, right, will never fully change or address all the imbalances and power disparities in our current food system, globally or regionally. So we need groups of profoundly agroecological businesses, right? And I think that's also a very strong opportunity of the studio model again, because it allows us to build and invest in a portfolio approach, right? Soon, if our businesses are successful, we will be able to offer Eden seeds, ecologic, organic inputs, market access, all kinds of solutions. We're developing a natural fungicide as well to replace mancozeb and improve health for consumption. No? And so we could offer all those solutions and products to one single farmer community, right? So we have a bundle of interventions that together will bring about that change. And while we do that, we're also building the movement. It's amazing how many synergies have already happened between our participants in our boot camp, right? Between our Rootical community members. People have had consultancy engagements together. People have exported crops, exported products together. People have worked together in all kinds of way, right? And it's really a very rich pool of talent, ideas, feedback, networks, contacts, all of it. I really think by building businesses and training people, we are also contributing to the wider organic movement.
And I think the impact is much bigger from a financial point of view in terms of like making sure it's self-sustaining, and also, as you said, building sort of like a community or people who have all the knowledge and sort of to push the movement forward. So that's pretty interesting. So yeah, looking forward to see how that goes, and in terms of like the impact you will overall have along Uganda and then across East Africa. So this part of the podcast, I usually have a segment I call rapid fire questions. So what I've done, I've prepared 10 questions for you. Yeah, I'll just throw a question to you. You'll give a quick and short answers to the questions. And the goal is just for the guys to get to know you a little bit better, just in case it didn't come through the conversations. So are you ready?
I am, yeah.
All right. So the first question is, what is one myth about regenerative agriculture you wish would disappear?
I want to mention the hunt for price premiums, right? Or always promising that organic products should be, one, more expensive to produce, and two, sold at a higher price. I think in a context of East Africa, where we usually have low input and low management kind of farming systems, I don't think regenerative organic food needs to be more expensive. I actually think it's doing a disfavor to the movement, because it's always positioning organic as exclusive in the minds of our Kenyan and Ugandan consumers.
Second question, what is the most exciting regenerative project you've seen in Africa recently?
Yeah, it's really difficult to pick one, because I see a lot of things are moving. I want to pick two. One is one we're developing as Rootical. It's called Intelligent Soil for now. And it's basically an AI-based application that allows farmers to measure their soil with a spectrometer, a simple probe. We can measure about 8 parameters quite reliably And then after the measurement, the data goes to the cloud, and then farmers can use their simple button feature phone to call and talk with their soil. So basically we do AI voice recognition, and then we create an AI bot or avatar, however you want to call it, that talks back as your soil, right? So you can ask, hey, hi soil, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm not feeling so well. I'm running low on nitrogen or whatever. Yeah, I'm thinking of planting tomatoes this year. Is that a good idea? No, well, I think, this and this would suggest that, this is not a good idea, and maybe you should add some of this, or maybe you should do more mulching, or maybe, or maybe you should rather go for this kind of crop first, nitrogen fixing or whatever, right? So it's really, really exciting. And what I love about it is that, first of all, farmers don't need any technology. They can use a very simple feature phone to call and talk with their soil. We can overcome language barriers. Uganda has like 50 plus different languages, so farmers can really talk to their soil in their own language without a problem, and we give them instant access to grounded regenerative advice, right? Which is also very hard to access in many cases. So I'm very excited about this because it seems so scalable, right? So yeah, that's what I'm really excited about. Another one is some partners of us in Uganda, especially some Danish actors are doing quite a lot of work now on earthworks and resilience design. So yeah, large scale landscape interventions to harvest water, to slow sink, spread and slow spread, sink and store, right? Water. So I really love the magnitude of what they are doing and the implications that again can have on rehydrating the landscape and bringing back rains, or at least stabilizing climate.
That is fascinating. So the third question is, which regenerative leader is inspiring you the most right now?
A very difficult pick, but I decided to only mention women. So Sylvia Kuria, here, your friend and guest on the podcast here in Kenya. Sylvia Banda in Zambia, building an empire of agroecological restaurants promoting indigenous foods and culture, and many other businesses around that. Mariama Sonko, a leader in Western Africa, developing this, what's the name? The Roiko, but then the organic, healthy version of it. Those food, spices, condiments, right? And doing a lot of other things around that as well. She's really an amazing regional food system leader. Judith Bakiria, she's from Uganda. They have quite a large permaculture farm. She's permaculture pioneer. She's also done a lot around traditional plants and medicine. And then, of course, Benedetta Kyongo. She's also doing amazing work here about regenerative agriculture in the slums, less favored neighborhoods of Nairobi, connecting them also to healthy, nutritious, regenerative, organic foods with organization Feedback to the Future. So amazing women, amazing leaders.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really, really interesting and fascinating leaders as well. So the fourth question, what is the biggest misconception investors still have about African founders?
I believe that African founders and entrepreneurs are incredibly talented and incredibly grounded in the problems they are obsessed about solving. Yet investors still invest in foreigners mostly. If you look around, most of agribusinesses in Kenya or Uganda are actually foreign-owned and led. And we want to do something about that with Rootical, as we discussed. Steward ownership is key there. And if you look at the companies that are successful in raising money, in a recent year, 8 out of 10 were foreign-owned and led, right? So, or run by foreigners. Often people from the US or Europe, like myself. So I think that's a problem. That's really a systemic racial kind of problem. Yeah, when hiring for senior positions, also I always find people looking at foreigners, no, and I think that's deeply problematic.
So the fifth question is, what is the earliest signal that tells you a founding team will likely succeed?
We've discussed this a bit. So listen to your customers, dare to fail. As I said, before, action speaks louder than words.
100%. The sixth question, if you could introduce one policy to unlock regenerative investment, what will it be?
Tax the rich. It would do much more than just unlocking investment in agroecology, I think. We could really rebuild our societies, rethink the way we generate and distribute wealth in our societies.
Seventh question, what is one piece of advice regen investors should stop giving?
We've learned a lot about the difference between solo founders and co-founder teams. In general investment spheres, most initiatives always push for co-founding teams. We've actually learned, especially in our first cohort, that solo founders in our journey can maybe perform better because they can't hide behind somebody else's inaction. If they don't move, nothing moves, right? And actually there is quite some evidence also around solo founders doing better in the long run, raising more capital and also creating more value.
Yeah. Is it because there's likely to be less friction between two people, or like a divergence in missions and
exactly all of that? Yeah. I'm not against co-founding teams, right? But for instance, now in our current cohort, we only have solo founders at the moment, and we'll build teams around them, and we'll also potentially look for co-founders when time is ripe.
All right. Eighth question, what is the single biggest thing holding back regenerative startups today?
It's talent. It's not funding or ideas, but it's talent, right? And as I said earlier, how do we attract, select, and nurture talent into the agroecological space and entrepreneurship? I think that's what we should be working and learning much more about. Yeah.
Ninth question, what is your boldest prediction for Africa's food system by 2030?
I wanted to say freeing Africa from the shackles of colonization and modern day capitalism, let's say, or food sovereignty. But 5 years is a really short timeline to get there. So I want to say 100 new systemic agroecological businesses.
All right. The last question, if you could send one message to your 18-year-old self, what would you say?
There's this saying that I really love from Pippi Longstocking, Astrid Lindgren, that says, I've never tried it before, so I think I can do it.
That is visionary and bold, I guess, in terms of going into the territories that you might not be comfortable with, but still doing it anyway. So pretty much interesting. Thank you very much for passing by the podcast. So I really, really appreciate it, for sharing some of your biggest insights and your world of investing in regenerative businesses. And the amazing work you're doing generally in the regenerative and sustainable farming systems. In case people want to follow you or want to get to know more about your work, how would they do that?
So Rootical.org is where we share a lot. We have a stories section where we publish a lot of our work. We're also quite active on LinkedIn especially. So feel free to follow Rootical on LinkedIn or myself. I'd be happy to connect and share more. Thanks also for the work you do, for welcoming me in the East African organic family and movement, and also for our collaboration on this series on regenerative African voices, right? I think we need to show and support much more of those homegrown solutions.
Yeah, looking forward to the collaborations as well. It's an amazing series. I think we have very interesting people who are doing amazing work in the regenerative space across Africa, right? East Africa, West Africa. So it's really going to be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to that, especially getting to work with, someone I considered a mentor of mine as well in Kuhn, with the amazing work that he's done with his podcast as well. So thank you for making all that possible and supporting that series. So looking forward to that as well. And we have a lot to do, but thank goodness you pioneering an area that wasn't possible a few years ago, but now I think a lot more people are aware that such businesses can be built across East Africa. So thank you for leading that. And I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I hope you learned a thing or two about how we can build businesses and the amazing work that is being done around the regenerative space in East Africa. So till the next podcast, remember to be organic. Cheers.